First of all, let's go back to how it all started with you. A little bit late, a little bit, maybe not as everybody would think it would start, but tell me how.
Trying to make up for lost time now. Yeah, at 26 years old, which it's crazy to me to think that I'm now 38, so it's been 12 years since I got into this, but started from scratch. Had never done anything like this before. Grew up in Newfoundland, played hockey like every kind of Canadian kid does, and moved to Banff, Alberta at 19 years of age. First time I had ever really set foot in true mountains and got to experience that. And hadn't done anything in the way of running background at all. Got really inspired by Eco Challenge, which was the big expedition race that happened in the 90s. Mark Burnett, who went on to start other reality TV shows, started that up. It used to have a $1 million budget. It was big prime time television. I saw that on TV while I was living in Banff, probably 35 pounds heavier than I am now, enjoying many drinks. And I looked at it and thought, that right there, that's what I want to do. I want to do that one day. And then I was with a bunch of my buddies and we made a pact that we were going to do it one day. Unfortunately, the other guys never followed through on the pact. We continued drinking, but eventually, a few years later, I did decide to go down that path. And at 26, I started from scratch. I had kayaked maybe twice in my life, had really rarely mountain biked a little bit in Banff, and had not done anything really in the way of running. Had done a couple of half marathon road runs and started down this road. And through going through expedition adventure racing and training, had found continually that running for me was the sport I loved the most, the sport that came the most natural to me. So in 2008, I sold my kayak and my mountain bike and started focusing 100% on ultra running. And since then, going on 2015 now, it's hard to believe that's 7 years. It's been a really fun journey.
So all that put together would make sense for you to turn to trails as opposed to road, right?
Absolutely. It's funny because the very first coach I had, really the only coach I had, a lady named Val Burke when I used to live in Whistler. She now coaches some Olympic snowboarders in New Zealand. They've since relocated. So a great resume. And she said to me, she assessed me within 30 days and said, I can't get you to do any training on roads because you get far too bored too quickly. You need the stimulation of the trails.
When we look at your results, you look at the races profile, you're not really a climber, you're a great downhill runner, but you're mostly a guy who goes at anything, and when it's tough, that's when you shine.
I'm very fortunate in that there's an element of resiliency, stubbornness, toughness. I don't know, I grew up in Newfoundland, as I mentioned. My grandfather was a fisherman. The East Coast climate can be rather harsh, and I certainly believe that some of those elements that I just had on a daily basis as a youth contribute to my ability to find positive and negative situations, which I think is a huge contributing factor to success in expedition or 100-milers or anything where you're going through the night. And just the stubbornness to really not stop plodding forward. And where I've had my best success is really difficult races where people start to fade late in the race, and I've got my pace that I can sustain, which ends up picking people off near the end.
Hurt is one of them. That's gonna be your name, isn't it?
It is indeed, yeah, the Hurt 100-miler in Hawaii. The first time I ran it was in 2010. It's 20-mile loops, there's 5 loops. And there's only 12 miles of actual unique terrain within the 20 miles because there's 2 long out and backs and 1 short out and back. But when I flew to Hawaii in 2010, I was still a relative unknown in what I was doing, had some success. And the course record at the time was Jeff Rose, who was a dominant figure on the sport for many years. And I set foot on the Hurt course, and within 3 miles of running it, I just thought, wow, this is exactly what I run all the time on the North Shore, highly technical, and also a bit of a mind, I don't want to throw in the curse word now, but like it messes with you mentally because you're just repeating everything. You need to find ways to stay inspired, to stay in the race. And I think that's the biggest thing people come up against when they're racing Hurt is it's too easy to quit. So I had great success with that right away. And again, as you mentioned, a very difficult course, very technical, and a race where you need to be really stubborn to get your way to the finish line.
You look at pros, usually they come from either a triathlon, track background, road running, like Krupicha ran his first marathon, he was like 10 years old.
Ridiculous. Yeah, you look at the pictures, you can't believe it.
It's a bit different for you.
It really is. I've always kind of gotten a kick out of that. The fact that my peers and the guys that I've gotten to know over the years and that I race against have all been doing this their entire lives. And as mentioned, I mean, I I know for a fact that before I started this when I was 26, I had run less than 100 total miles in my entire life. I know that for a fact because the few times I did try running, I started trying to keep a log. And I remember there was one time I was traveling, I was in Australia, it was the year 2000, and I ran for 6 straight days, and I had the journal. And on day 7 I wrote, running is stupid, I'll never do this again. So it took a while for me to really get inspired by running, and I think a lot of people find that as well. A lot of people seem to come to it later in life. But yeah, I've always gotten a kick out of the fact that a lot of the guys I compete against have almost a lifetime more experience than I do. And I feel like I've been playing catch up a lot of these years and trying to make up for that lost time along the way.
You're a racer, you're also somehow a pioneer as far as fastest known times. They weren't even called that way when you started.
Yeah, it's funny because I called them speed records. That's what we used to call them at the time, and there was like the battle of terms. Is it a speed record? Is it an FKT? FKT sounded so like just abrupt almost. I didn't gravitate towards that, and then the website popped up, and FKT as a term, fastest known time, makes a lot more sense because you don't know what happened prior to the Strava age and the GPS age, and people were still doing amazing things, decades ago. So yeah, I was doing FKT attempts when I knew them as speed records. 2010 being the big year where I had an FKT on the West Coast Trail on Vancouver Island and the East Coast Trail in Newfoundland, 14 days apart. The West Coast Trail being 80 kilometers, they call it 75, I guarantee it's 80. And the East Coast Trail is a long-term project to have over 500 kilometers of trail. But the previous record by Ray Zahab was on a 215 kilometer stretch. When I ran it in 2010, it was the only stretch that you could really make sense of. And I think they're up to about 265 now, but 215 kilometer FKT 14 days after the West Coast Trail.
That makes things interesting, all that within a couple weeks.
It was very interesting. I actually had a bit of a hip injury that I brought with me when I went home to Newfoundland, and I was only home for 5 days, and the weather was shifting, and I said to my mother at one point, I don't know if I have this in me tomorrow, and she basically said, doesn't matter if you have it in you or not, you still gotta wake up and go for it because that's it, your window will expire, which is great. Again, the mentality of the Newfoundlander and my family is just, show up, give it your best, and see what you've got. And it ended up being a very good day.
What was your best running result or day ever, your best running memory?
I get asked that question, and there's certainly, it's an evolving answer on an annual basis. I've got a couple of races that really stand out as being my favorite races. One in particular is the 2013 Neenacker, the local race, 30 miles. 8.5, almost 9,000 feet of climbing and descent, a very established course record of 4 hours and 39 minutes. What made that day so special for me was I came from behind and I was also caught with less than 2 miles to go to the finish line by someone I hadn't seen all day. And I had to find a way to react in that moment and not crumble. And it brought out something in me that could only be brought out in those circumstances that I've only seen that side of myself a handful of times in my entire life. And those are special moments because those are things that you can only get from a race experience. UTMF, Ultra Trail Mount Fuji, also in 2013. I went up against one of the deepest fields of international 100-mile runners I had ever gone up against before. At mile 85, I found myself ahead of Julien Chouret and Sebastian Chegnaud, 2 absolute legends. I gave a little bit too much, a little too early. I finished about 20 minutes, 30 minutes behind those guys in the end for 4th, but again, for me, a result I was really proud of. But the answer I've always defaulted to with that is not the standard answer around a positive race result. It's actually in 2009, I went to Western States, the most infamous 100-miler, the first of the granddaddy that started it all.
Big race.
The big race, exactly, the one. And I was full of piss and vinegar and very little experience. And my father, because I started this later in life, had never seen me race before. He flew up from Newfoundland. He was crewing for me. It was the first time he'd ever seen me in an event. And I went out, in hindsight, too hard and didn't have any acclimation to the heat. And I crumbled, and I really absolutely just fell apart. And the final 20 miles from the river, Rucky Chucky, I got there in a reasonable time. The final 20 miles to the finish, I walked, and the 32 kilometers took me almost 8 hours to walk it in. And I couldn't flex my legs. I was actually peeing copper. My kidneys were shutting down. It was a bad experience. But I was able to walk to the finish line in an incredibly slow time, like the final 20 miles, but I still got there in 23 hours and 7 minutes and got a sub 24 buckle. My father, being there to see the whole thing, made it that much more special. And for me, that was one of the affirming moments within the ultra running, of knowing that I could persevere through a lot of the challenges that would come my way.
So Western States, you did go back and you took care of business.
I learned from my mistakes. That's something I've always been proud of as well, is that I can step back and assess what actually went wrong and figure it out. And 1 year later, I trained slightly differently, but more than anything, I got the heat training in. I respected how hot it would actually be there. And a year later, I ran 6 hours faster for 6th place overall.
And you made it into Unbreakable.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the most famous ultra running documentary. And I'm still convinced to this day that they don't normally roll down to 6 people, but I was so ecstatic because of my experience the year prior that I just let loose and with emotion at the finish line. And I think that's the main reason they cut to 6 instead of just cutting it at 5 for the documentary. But yeah, I mean, an incredibly special experience in 2010. It wasn't just about attaining what I believed I could do, which is empowering in itself to believe you can accomplish something. You need to then prove that you can do it. But it was the year, you know, Kilian Jornet, Tony Kaprichka, Jeff Rose, Nick Clark.
Best field ever.
Yeah, and it was really special to be a part of everything that it was that year, because it was the biggest show in town in North America for races.
Now you actually also moved on as far as you have your own races, you're a coach, you're taking this to the next level.
In 2010, it was the best of times and the worst of times. I had a very successful Hurt 100 Western States, West Coast speed record, East Coast speed record, FKTs maybe, and then I broke my foot. Like, it was boom, 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 success, 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 and then it was done. And it was a Jones fracture, which is an incredibly complex, it's a runner's worst nightmare. I was on crutches for 4 months. I got off crutches. I broke it a second time. I was back on crutches another 4.5 months. And I was faced with what I would call my mortality as a runner. You know, I got into it later in life. So I've only had a short window to be there, and all of a sudden it was gone. And I had to assess long term, what did I want from the sport of ultra running? Knowing full well, again, now at 38 years old, I'm not going to be super competitive for the rest of my life. It doesn't happen that way. You get old and you start to slow down. You have to accept that. But how do I want to still be present in this scene when that is the case? And I realized that this sport came to me later in life, and I love it dearly, and it means the world to me. And I first and foremost want to be a healthy, happy runner late in life, so that I can be out on these trails 30 years from now. I see people doing it every day, and I want to be one of those people. But I also want to be a contributor in that scene, and I wanted to be able to inspire people into trail and ultra running. And what I realized was doing that as a race director would make a lot of sense. So I took a race that didn't occur in 2011, being the stormy 50 miler in Squamish, and it was handed to me. We rebranded, we redesigned the course a little bit, came out with the Squamish 50 in 2012, and had really great success with it right off the start. And that snowballed into then creating a local shorter distance running series called the Coast Mountain Trail Series. And that snowballed into pairing up with my buddy Eric Carter, who's currently racing ski mountaineer racing in Europe and doing quite well for himself against Kilian and all the best in the world, and starting a coaching business. So when I look back on it, the injury was horrific in the moment, and I really had to question again if I was even going to be able to run again. At one point, a doctor said you may never be able to run down mountains like you have before, because your foot may not be able to withstand the impact. And to look back on that years later now and realize that that is really what drove me into this new direction, and I feel very successful for where I am and what I've accomplished within this sport. And I love the fact that no matter what my personal results are, they mean nothing in terms of being a coach and being a race director.
You're also going to be a dad really soon. How's that?
I've only got a few months left before there's an alarm clock I can't hit snooze on. Super excited. I mean, I got married a couple of years ago. Found the woman of my dreams, love my wife to death, and we are on the same trajectory. We wanted the same things. We decided late last year that we were going to start down the road of trying to start a family. We got very lucky early on, and August 12th, 10 days before the Squamish 50, we're expecting a little one. So over the moon excited about that. Really just can't wait for it.
Is it going to shape things for your next racing year as well?
This year I've already made some adjustments just knowing that. Obviously you don't want to miss the birth of your child.
It's always a good place to be.
Yeah, I would like to be able to purchase a stroller and some, a running stroller and stuff, so I have to budget for that. Last year I was fortunate to do quite a bit of travel for races, and this year it's going to be more of a home front kind of race calendar. I'm getting to go to Spain in May for a 115-kilometer race called CSP 115. It's an acronym for the 3 main towns it goes through. So very excited about that, but when I chose the bigger races this year, I'm trying to keep them at least on the North American side for financial reasons, and then also for the need to potentially cancel something on short notice. So yeah, a couple of alterations there, but yeah, very excited about the whole thing.
And you're also throwing a couple of fun things around, like Aliacala, rim to rim to rim, a bit of climbing.
So yeah, all of a sudden the bucket list runs start coming out. We went to Hawaii in January. We do every year. We go for the Hurt 100. I decided in December that I wasn't going to race this year. I raced a 100-kilometer race in South Africa on November 22nd called the Sky Run. It's 100 kilometers, no aid stations, no flagging, 1 resupply point, and has, I think, 15,000 feet of climbing.
Sounds amazing.
It does sound amazing, and again, right in line with what I can where I can succeed as a runner. Difficult, you need to be mentally strong and physically strong. Had a great race, finished second, was again like over the moon. I've said that a few times, excited about it. And when I went to start training and turn around for Hurt, I just found that I was tired and unmotivated, and I made the decision to step away from running for about 5 weeks, enjoy some skiing, and reassess my calendar. But we still went to Hawaii. Spent 6 days on Oahu for the race, paced a friend, cheered on the runners, volunteered for the race, went to the banquet, had a blast. And then we went to Maui for 4 days afterwards. Max King, who used to be my teammate on Montreal Mountain Hardware and now runs for Solomon, happened to be on Maui at the same time. We had no idea. We see each other on Twitter. He says, hey, let's do Haleakala. It's a bucket list run. 20 miles. You start by putting your foot in the ocean and you run to 10,023 feet above sea level through what starts as overbrush, almost rainforest, I guess, down below, heavily rained areas, into a volcanic crater and straight up into what looks like a lunar surface at the top. Absolutely stunning.
Kind of biggest climb you can ever do on Earth.
It's one of, for sure. Yeah, I don't know anywhere else where you can start at sea level and go to over 10,000 feet in such a short distance. Wow. So that was amazing. And then I had another opportunity that just popped up with some friends where they're running the Grand Canyon next month. And a few Canadian friends are doing the Zion Traverse in April, and I couldn't do both. It financially didn't make sense. So I chose the Canyon. I've never been. Obviously, again, one of those big bucket list items. Just booked my flight a few days ago and really excited to get a chance to experience that.
We're at this point of the interview where I usually shoot some quick questions and you answer whatever comes to mind.
All right, I got my defenses up for the shots coming at me.
Yeah. I know you cheated. You read them online.
yeah, that's right. I did my research.
What's your favorite running movie ever?
I haven't watched a ton of running movies, but St. Ralph, I think, is a really pleasant movie. I enjoyed that when I watched it.
What's your favorite running book?
Born to Run. I think that's overwhelmingly what most people choose. It is an amazing read. Even as someone who never ran track and has only stepped on a track a handful of times in my life, it's a pretty motivational book to read.
He's coming with the third this summer.
The second was kind of disappointing, so I did not know that, actually.
Coming out this summer.
I like it. Okay, I can get some closure here.
What's your favorite running food?
I'm on the cashews these days. I always have like a mini bag of cashews on me when I'm out on the trails. Just easy to digest and really tasty, high calorie.
And what do you go for before the race? What's your favorite meal?
Just something light, like a banana and almond butter or something, and coffee.
Nothing complicated?
Nothing too complex. No, actually before runs I try to keep put as little in my stomach as possible in the morning, just to not have any stomach distress while running.
What's your favorite running piece of gear, the must-have for you?
I have always loved running vests, and I've always loved the Solomon running vests. Even when I was running for other brands, it was like they make the best vests. And the evolution of that product has been insane. I just got the newest version a couple of days ago, and it weighs 100 grams. I mean, I don't know how it can be any lighter. Running vest. I love having the ability to put stuff on my body and just have the phone and the fluids and everything in there and out of the way.
What's your favorite running course ever?
Favorite running course ever? Going back towards the really technical courses, 2 courses that are very special for me, the Nienacker, the first 50K I ever ran, and then the Hurt 100. Both courses that I've had success on, and I just love the aesthetic of a super technical race.
And the Hurt, you have something very special with that race, right?
Yeah, everything about it really. I mean, yeah, that's where my wife and I basically started dating, and we've got a great community of friends over there, course record. Yeah, nothing but positive memories. Well, I did break my foot on the course once, but mostly positive memories from there. I had a really fun helicopter ride, though. Here's the funny thing about that. The day before, it was just beautiful. It's just spines going up the middle of the island, and there's trails to all the ridges. And I looked up and said, it would be amazing to fly over these mountains. And 24 hours later, I was in a basket 60 feet below a helicopter flying over the mountains and going, oh man, I said it out loud.
Careful what you wish.
Yeah, exactly.
The runner you look up to the most?
The runner I look up to the most, I don't know if it's one individual person. Certainly, I mean, Kilian Jornet is doing amazing things. He's an amazing person. It makes it much easier to cheer for someone that you truly like as a person. I think we couldn't have a better ambassador than Kilian for what the sport is right now. But certainly, for me, I find great motivation in the mid to backpack runners, the everyday family people that have to make a balance of life happen to be out there on the trails. And I think also never worth losing sight of, the reason that we have sponsored runners in ultra running right now is not because we have really fast runners coming into the sport. It's because we have thousands and thousands of people coming into the sport and finishing the races. And those are the people that are allowing the sponsored athletes to get sponsored and get things paid for these days. Yeah, those are the people that I am always impressed by how they can make their entire life work and balance it all out to be out on the trails loving it as much as everybody else.
If you do drink beer, what is your favorite beer, if not your favorite refreshment?
I have a gluten intolerance. I do love Guinness and I do love stouts, but they don't agree with me. So I've been drinking a lot of Cabernet Sauvignon wine for a couple of years.
And just to finish, what is your favorite running quote, if you do have one, or any quote?
Not really a running quote, but Walter Payton, it's a tagline on my emails, and it's just, tomorrow is promised to no one. And it's a very simple and meaningful few words, and it's just absolutely true. I was out on a run with a buddy this morning, and you can never lose sight of how fortunate we are to be here right now, and that everything else is uncertain, and you don't even know if you're going to be here tomorrow. Honestly, we just don't know that, so cherish it while you can.
And one last thing, I know you have your running series. There's one on the East Coast, something called Harricana. Maybe we could have some kind of a challenge one day. What about that?
I like that idea a lot, actually. I've heard nothing but great stuff about their race out east. The race director and I have had a few emails, and I've had some good emails with the French-Canadian runners to try and get them here as well. Amazing talent out east. It would be really great to have the clash of the East Coast and the West Coast, and to have something lined up where we have that great race out east and the great race out west, Squamish 50, kind of helping to foster and grow the sport in Canada.
Some kind of a cool East Coast, West Coast thing.
Absolutely, yeah. And even though I grew up east, as far east as you can go, I'm going to have to represent the West for this.
Very good. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you so much, guys.